Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto world. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. So, where are we going today? Naruto asked cheerfully as I panted, my lungs desperately working to give my body much needed oxygen. I hate your stamina, Naruto. I grumbled as he waved me off. We started making our way to the physical training area for the conditioning exercises. I hate exercising, Shikamaru said, to which all of us rolled our eyes. I'm sure even Shino did. In case anyone is wondering, the Aburam hadn't quite become a regular in our group. But he did stay with us during classes and hung out with us now and then. He mostly kept to himself while out of the academy though. None of us had a problem with that. We just assumed he just was that kind of person. Honestly, I don't feel like doing anything today. How about we go to your house and play some shogi, Shikamaru? I asked with my breathing slowly coming back to normal. Sure. The lazy genius said, smirking at me while Naruto groaned. Nope, I'm not going to spend my day like that. Chouji, how about we go? While the blonde knucklehead started making plans with the Akimichi heir, I was acutely aware of someone's eyes on us. Shikamaru and I looked at each other. Even ignoring it is getting troublesome, he said with a sigh, and I couldn't help but agree. For the longest time, someone was almost stalking us. Although, being completely fair, this person's attention wasn't focused on us. It was focused on main character Khan. You have 3 guesses as to who I'm talking about, and the first 2 don't count. I turned my head slightly to look at the girl with dark blue hair and almost white eyes. Hinata Hyuga really hadn't changed much from canon apparently. She couldn't keep her eyes off Naruto during academy hours, and although I couldn't prove it, I was sure she watched him outside from time to time. This meant that she also watched our group most of the time, as we always were together with him. It wasn't like we had a problem with the girl, not really. It was just a bit tiresome to deal with her stares sometimes, not that the oblivious idiot noticed, but Shikamaru, Shino and I surely did. The Aburam hadn't commented on it though. I'm really starting to think we should do something about it, I said with a grimace. Like what? The Nara asked me with a raised eyebrow. And I stared at him for a second. He could follow my train of thoughts no problem. Sure enough, he sighed again. Do we have to? I don't know what is more troublesome, doing that or keeping things like this. I kind of want to help, I said with an awkward half smile. Shyness is kinda cute, but sometimes it's just a bit much. That's her case, honestly, I said, trying not to insult her. I really didn't have a problem with her, I knew she was a great person. But that extreme shyness. You are remarkably not troublesome, IG. But sometimes. He just ended the statement with yet another sigh, and I smiled apologetically at him. During the spa wait time, he asked, resigned. I guess. I shrugged. I looked around. Reckon I'll have to fight Kiba today. Probably, he answered disinterestedly. Can't get past this week. I nodded in agreement. I had been fortunately dodging that bullet for a long time. I was running out of time. Luckily for me, I was already at a level that I was confident I could beat the Inuzuka, or at least put up a hell of a fight. I wouldn't worry too much. Thanks. I smiled at him. Shikamaru wasn't one to give compliments, that was as close as he could get to one. Just a moment later, I received a notification. Physical conditioning has gone up a level. To which I brought up the skills screen. Physical conditioning, passive, LVL 13. Improves the rate at which your strength and constitution increase during training by 65%. I didn't know how to feel with my progress lately. Some skills were starting to take a long time to level. 2 weeks had passed since my official spar against Chaoji and I had earned just 1 level on most skills except Shogi, which had gone up 3 levels, meditation having gone up 2 and Shuriken throwing that hadn't leveled up at all yet. Even my stats slowed down considerably. I had only gotten 1 level for strength and 1 for dexterity, which still came with 1 for chakra, and constitution had leveled up twice. I found myself wishing to get a new skill or something. I missed those times where I got levels left and right. But I was able to stop myself from delving in any other skill. If I fell for that, I would only increase my workload and slow my progress down even more. I couldn't afford that, not when none of my skills were at an acceptable level. Once I had secured my place at the top of the class, only then I would consider something new. Maybe I would start training senbon throwing, or maybe I would ask Iruka-sensei for some tips about chakra control. That way I could get a head start on that while avoiding any kind of unwanted attention. But that was for later. I didn't have the time to use on other skills when I could barely manage as it was. Okay. Sensei called for our attention while clapping. Good job everyone, it's lunch break time and then we start with the Taijutsu spars. What did you bring today, IG? An excited Naruto appeared in front of my face as if he had used Shunshin, quickly followed by Chaoji. I deadpanned at the both of them. You brought this on yourself. Shikamaru pointed out before I could say something and I sighed. Oh. IG Sata vs Sajuka Chaiha. Iruka-sensei called out and my mind instantly thought, GG. After groaning and starting my way to the circle, I consoled myself with the thought that at least it wasn't Kiba the one that would give me my first defeat. As the brooding survivor made his way, I called a couple of screens. IG Sata. Title, Academy Student. Energy points, 131/320. Chakra points, 110/110. Strength, 14. Dexterity, 11. Constitution, 16. Chakra, 11. Chakra control, E. Well, he definitely had better stats than I did. The only thing I could probably rival him in was constitution. But that was only a possibility, not a fact. For everything else, I was painfully behind. Basic Taijutsu LVL 16. Increases the skill of the user in hand-to-hand combat according to skill level. Maybe we were on the same level in Taijutsu though, so there was my silver lining. Physical resistance LVL 4. Reduces the damage received by purely physical attacks by 4%. Physical resistance was still painfully low. I didn't have any delusions about the skill. It was just something that was there. Not a game-changing skill. At least, not yet. And at the rate it leveled. Not ever. Shaking those thoughts from my head and toning out the fangirl's screams, I focused on Sajuke. His expression was as brooding as ever, no surprise there. What did surprise me was that he seemed to want to start the match quickly, almost eagerly. He was never eager for a spar. Never. I gulped as we did the seal of confrontation. After that we both jumped back to put some distance between us and took our stances. I waited. The Uchiha's Taijutsu style consisted mainly of countering the opponent's attacks. The Sharingan made that stupidly easy after all. And while Sasuke didn't actually have the Sharingan yet, he still used the style and with impressive results too. No, I wouldn't be the one to attack. My best bet was to try and counter him instead. A gamble really, but considering that I was weaker than him in almost every aspect, everything in this match would be a gamble really. He rushed at me and I braced myself. A punch was directed at my face. Rotating my arm, I pushed his out of the way, effectively preventing the hit. Meanwhile my other hand formed a fist and flew towards his side. He stepped aside dodging my punch before throwing a kick behind my leg. Good news, I didn't end up on the floor. Bad news, my balance was ruined for a second. That second was enough for him to punch the air out of me with a fist to the gut. With a step back he readied himself for another kick, this time for more than just ruining my balance. Coughing to get my lungs working again, I followed his example, stepping back, out of his reach. I felt the wind produced by his foot graze my face. Too close. As I focused on him again, I paled. He was already on me. Another punch to the gut made me fold like a wet paper and I fell to my knees. A kick to the side of my head made everything turn white and I felt my face hit the ground. I heard voices my mind was too slow to translate into any kind of meaning. I saw lights, flashes of color all over my sight. But the feeling of the ground below me was oddly clear. Slowly and shakily, I pushed myself off the ground. I heard the voices lower their volume, but not stopping. I didn't hear Iruka-sensei calling the match, fortunately for me. You should stay down. It took my brain a lot longer than it should to decipher what Sasuke said to me. But eventually I did. I was still laying pathetically on the ground. The only thing keeping our teacher from calling the match was my arms supporting my upper body weakly and awkwardly in the air. Before answering, I pushed a leg underneath me. As the lights slowly blinked out of my sight, I found myself kneeling and staring down at the earth. I slowly turned my gaze to the side, where the Uchiha stood, relaxed but still focused on me. He hadn't let his guard down. I chuckled to myself. Of course, he hadn't. At that moment, I thought about it. I thought about giving up. And I thought about my friends too. I would have expected Naruto to be shouting some nonsense, to use his talk jutsu on me. Just as I still remembered him doing in the Chunin exams with Hinata and Sakura. But he didn't. Stand up. It was Shikamaru. I was so shocked I almost fell face first into the ground again. It'll be too troublesome to deal with your training if you lose, he said, and I chuckled again. What the lazy ass said. This time it was Naruto. I could almost hear the iconic grin on his face. They were watching. My friends were watching. But did it really matter? It was just an academy spar after all. I could keep training and then come back for a rematch. It would be fine. It wasn't that important, not really. You have to dream bigger. Naruto's words resounded in my head and I pushed myself off the ground, staggering to a side on my weak legs. Yeah, if I gave up here, what was to stop me from giving up later on? From giving up in my dream? No. I had a Nindo. Live life to the fullest. Sasuke didn't look like he had any problem waiting for me. That was strange, but I could definitely work with that. I looked around, acting groggier than I actually was. Looking for something that could turn the tide of the battle. Then I saw it and a crazy plan formed in my head. A smirk formed in my head. "Oi," I called out while mentally bringing a couple of screens to see if my plan could work. "Yeah, more than enough. Thank Cammy for the schedule for the spas. 2 seconds. In 2 seconds, I'll take you out." He smirked back at me. "We'll see," he simply said, taking his stance. Running. I cast it in my mind while speeding towards him. His eyes widened in surprise. Once I was close, I jumped feet first towards him. He stepped to the side confidently. I kept smirking as I separated my feet, and a second later, I wrapped both legs around his waist height. The speed of my flight didn't stop though. So, with all that momentum, I swung my body in a circle, making the Uchiha's body rotate with me and throwing him completely off balance. And then I let go, throwing him off to a side. Both of us fell to the ground. I laughed. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. "What's so funny?" he said, annoyed. "All that just for winner, IG Sata," Iruka called out over my laughs. "Ha!" Sajuk wasn't the only one to shout that in shock. I turned towards him and with a smirk in my face I put my index finger to the ground. "Look down." He did, and his mouth fell open. He was just outside the circle. "Yes!" I exclaimed, spreading my arms still sprawled on the ground. "First place, baby." I laughed before I felt someone get a hold of my arm and pull me up. That was so awesome! Naruto exclaimed, almost making me go deaf. You should have seen the Tom's face. It was priceless. "Best prank ever, believe it," he all but shouted while helping me to our group of friends. "Good job." Chaoji congratulated, offering me from his bag of chips. I happily took him on his offer. I felt amazing. Certainly, an unexpected tactic. Shino said, pushing his glasses up. "If only you were so smart during our matches." Shikamaru grumbled with a bored tone. I didn't even feel the need to smack him. "We've got to get dinner at Ishiraku's. I have to celebrate this," I commented, making Naruto beam at me. "Don't know what the fuss is about." Shikamaru shrugged. "You've trained for this all this time, haven't you?" he said as I took my seat. I stared at him as my brain caught what he really meant. I smiled. "Sometimes I think you are at Sund or something, Shika," I replied, and he huffed unaffected. "Troublesome," was all the answer I got. My grin widened as a screen came up. "Quest complete, win a spar against the first place. Reward. +6 to Jutsu level. +2 to all physical stats. Chakra has gone up a level. Chakra has gone up a level. Wait, why isn't it basic? Skill maxed, basic to Jutsu. New skill acquired, intermediate to Jutsu." I looked at the screens in stunned silence before mentally calling another one. Intermediate to Jutsu, active, LVL3. Increases the skill of the user in hand-to-hand combat according to skill level. Active effect increases the user's physical stats by 2. Active effect consumption 50 energy points per second. Cool, an active effect, finally. Then I froze. 50 energy points per second, are you fucking kidding? You okay there? Shikamaru said, waving his hand in front of my face. I shook my head before turning to him. He hit you pretty hard in the head, didn't he? He added with his usual bored tone. His eyes looked slightly concerned though. Naruto and Chaoji weren't as reserved. Maybe, I said weakly. I'll be fine, don't worry. Just need a minute or two. They seemed to take my word for it and continued watching the spars. Fortunately for me, Shikamaru didn't push for a shogi match. Sasuke is still the best. Someone screeched. I turned to see a pink-haired banshee screaming like her life depended on it. Not that she was the only one, just the more vocal. He just won with a trick. A cheap trick at that. The rest of the fangirls nodded along as she pointed at me like I had committed the worst kind of sin. Really, Naruto? I asked in disbelief. Of the whole lot of them. I shook my head. Well. He scratched the back of his neck. I was pretty desperate. Don't worry, we'll get you a better girlfriend. I looked him up and down, noting his still orange clothes. I hadn't been able to convince him to tone it down yet. But I would, even if it was the last thing I did. Eventually. I said, grimacing. Can you stop insulting the orange? He exclaimed indignantly, and I shook my head. Look at the bright side. Shikamaru said lazily, waving his hand, and I raised an eyebrow at him. And that is? I asked, and he seemed to take a moment to think about it. Ino isn't shouting together with her. He asked more than stated, and I turned again. Said Yamanaka was staring straight at me with an unreadable face. She isn't planning my death, is she? I asked nervously. Probably not. Chaoji answered while putting another handful of chips in his mouth. I gulped before turning to the board between Shika and me. Let's just play shogi. He didn't comment, but we did start a match. In between plays, I stared at the new skill. I had a good excuse for playing under my normal level anyway. 50 energy points was a lot. Basically, I could only use its effect for all of 7 seconds. That was shit. Especially considering that it only gave 2 points to each stat. Taking a deep breath in, I tried to see where the trick was. In the end though, I just deduced that the stat increase would be worth it after I leveled it up. That, and hopefully the consumption would lower considerably too. Here's hoping. I thought to myself, holding back a grimace. Once I got over that bitter piece of news, I slowly regained my smile. 6 levels in the Taijutsu skills and 2 in each physical stat. Basically, I was top of the class in Taijutsu now. No matter that I barely won by a technicality. Now I had the power to back it up. I was sure I had better stats than Sasuke now. Or that's what I would like to think. However, the spar was too one-sided. There had to be a reason for that. And then I noticed the problem. My dexterity was too low. He had been too fast for me to do anything. I had probably caught up to him in terms of constitution and strength. And the levels in Taijutsu probably put me ahead or at his level. But he was too fast for me to do anything. I wouldn't be able to beat him if I couldn't even land a hit. The only reason I caught him was my running speed increase and a trick. I had been ignoring my dexterity. Mostly because I didn't have a good way to increase it nor the time focus on that stat only. But with the progress I saved due to the quest, things would change. I could spend less time training Taijutsu and physical conditioning now. With those thoughts in mind, I started changing my training routine. The only things I knew affected dexterity were the Shuriken Jutsu skills and to a lower extent, running. Which actually made me pretty happy. I loved running and I really wanted to start making perfect scores in the Shuriken Jutsu training. I was also curious now that I had seen what happened with a skill that I managed to maximum. We stopped playing when Hinata was called for a spar and focused on her fight. It was both interesting and entertaining to see. I had always thought that the gentle fist was really cool to look in action, it was even more so in real life. That style is really interesting, I commented lightly. Cool, isn't it? Naruto exclaimed. Think Hinata-chan would teach me. She would probably faint just with you asking, Naruto. I thought to myself. Shikamaru looked like he had thought the same thing. It could happen. The Nara ended up saying with a barely restrained smirk. I rolled my eyes. I don't think I could use that style, said a dejected Chaoji. I nodded. Probably not. It's all precision and less force, basically the opposite of your style. He nodded back. I wouldn't feel too bad if I were you though. You are the strongest one here, that style wouldn't be suited for you. He paused his eating to turn to me. Thanks, he said, almost beaming at me. He really had confidence issues. Just stating facts, I replied, smiling back. A moment later Hinata won her match. The only ones that could do something to her were Ino and Sakura after all, and considering the small numbers of the female part of the class, the teachers couldn't keep the spars just to the capable fighters and as that group was conformed only by the aforementioned trio after all, and that was too small a number to exclude the others. As she took her seat, I stood up. I'll be back in a second. As I made my way to where she was, I saw her start fidgeting and poking her fingers together, no doubt aware I was going towards her. I sat next to her and extended my hand to introduce myself. Not that I thought she didn't know me, but I wanted to keep myself as polite as I could. Nice match, I said with a smile. I'm Ig Sata, by the way. TT, thank you, she stuttered out. I did my best to keep my face from expressing anything about it. Hinata Hyuga, she said shyly, taking my hand. You hold back a lot when you spar, I pointed out, and she tensed up. I was just wondering why. I don't like fighting, she said, looking away from me and poking her fingers together again. You know we are training to be ninja, right? I asked, keeping my tone from sounding like I was mocking her. Her only answer was looking down. I meant that we need to know how to fight. I wouldn't want you to hold back if you sparred against me. It would make the spar useless if I can't improve. I don't know if what I say makes sense to you, I explained, and she kept her gaze down. I know, she whispered, so low I barely caught it. I still don't like it, she admitted, and I held back a sigh. What's your style's name? I asked, changing topics. Gentle Fist, she answered. Why is it called that? I knew obviously, but IG didn't, so I played the part. B, because even the lightest H hit can do serious D damage. Well, her stutter wasn't so bad. Or maybe it was because I wasn't Naruto. Yeah, that was probable. Wow, sounds dangerous, I commented. It is. She nodded, suddenly looking much more nervous. And why's that? I continued asking. With the Bibakugan and I injected chakra through our fingers. She hesitated for a second. We can see cause internal D damage, she explained. We can also close T tenketsus, she added after a moment. Tenketsus are the places from where we can use chakra, right? Thankfully, we had classes about that, although sensei tended to just gloss over it as we would see it in depth next year. Right. She confirmed. Not that I needed her to. Closing tenketsus, wouldn't you basically disable someone without actually hurting them? I asked this time and she seemed a bit stunned. It could be the case. People still can use Taijutsu though. She answered. Still, leaving someone unable to use chakra is basically taking them out. Not many can fight that well only using Taijutsu. I reasoned. True. She accepted. I see why someone would call it gentle fist. You can basically defeat someone without damaging them. I said. I had finally reached the point that I wanted to. If I remembered correctly, Hinata was a bit like Chaoji. Too gentle to fight properly. I wanted to show her that fighting didn't actually mean damage, especially for her. I guess so. She nodded. It's a pity you need your bloodline limit. I would love to learn that style. I commented. Why you could. She replied and my head snapped at her. I didn't know that, so I was pretty surprised. Really? She seemed taken aback by my reaction and leaned back with wide eyes before simply humming and nodding. But, how? I asked incredulously. You said you needed the Bakugan. I pointed out. Normally, why you do? The Hyuga answered. But some blocks and organ S strikes don't need Bakugan precision to be done. She explained and I stared at her wide-eyed until she started fidgeting again. Could you teach me? I asked almost pleading. I am not sure. She said looking away. It's a C-clan style after all. Her eyes dropped and a sad smile formed in her face. Then you need permission. My voice came out calmer this time as I realized I was making her uncomfortable. Why yes, and I doubt I could get it. She replied with a sad tone. I see. Then, how about spas? You can do that outside of the academy, can't you? She seemed surprised that I hadn't pushed the issue or just left her after that. I see can. Why? Hinata asked, curious and nervous at the same time. You could join us. I offered with a smile. Shikamaru, Chaoji, Naruto and I get together sometimes to spar against each other. It's good practice. I explained and I had to suppress an amused smile as I saw her face slowly turn red after I mentioned Naruto. We do stealth practice, play shogi and go out to eat too, if you are interested. As I said, you are welcome to join if you want. I finished while standing up and shaking the dust off my clothes. It was good talking to you, Hinata, see you later. See you later. And like that, our little conversation was over. Internally, I wondered if she would be brave enough to ask her father about teaching us the gentle fist, or even just about hanging out with us. It would probably take a long time, if ever. Let's continue, shall we? I asked Shikamaru as I took my usual seat in front of him. How did it go? He asked, making his move. It went well, I think. We'll have to see. I shrugged. Oh. In two different locations roughly at the same time. He defeated the Uchiha. Said a serious, yet curious, voice. Admittedly, through a trick, but he did. What do we know about the boy? The person asked his subordinate. Orphan of the Kyuubi incident. Nothing of notice after that until the start of this year's academy classes. Another voice replied. Possible prodigy, possible bloodline limit, possibly both. What bloodline limit? Unregistered, unknown. So far, we have collected an increase in running speed at will, occasional decrease of presence while engaging in stealth-based activities and an abnormally high development in the strength and stamina departments, all this without the use of chakra. It is believed that if he does have a bloodline limit, it is one based around development. Anything else of notice? He has been surrounding himself with the Akimichi, Nara and Aburam clan heirs and the Kyuubi Jinshuriki. He has also approached the current Hyuga heiress. I see. Gathering political power or just capable individuals, or both, maybe. The leader pondered for a moment before turning to his subordinate. Keep me up to date with any new information that you find about him. Ig Sato seems like an interesting individual. I grinned like a madman as I got inside my apartment. Finally, I had reached another milestone with running. The cost had gone down another little bit. To most people, it would be just another almost unnoticeable change. To me though, it meant a lot. Why? Simple. With this little boost, the 2 levels I had achieved in dexterity and the level I got in constitution, another goal would be met. It was time to dethrone the speed demons. The last 2 weeks had been a lot different from the time before. With me having stopping my extra training in taijutsu and physical conditioning outside of classes, I had a lot more free time. Free time that was spent in shuriken jutsu and running specifically. Although, being honest, I didn't quite use as much time in those really. I did increase that training, but I had been focused on meditation too. Considering that I spent a crazy amount of energy points with running every day, both in class and out of it, I had spent a long time just recovering, and that meant meditation. That much time to myself had opened my mind to some things, mainly my chakra training or rather lack thereof. I still stood by my choice to focus on things that were actually being put to test. But I realized something that had escaped my mind. The first step of chakra control was the leaf concentration exercise. Which was simply sticking a leaf to your forehead. Which in turn was something that I could pretty easily do while meditating. I really wanted to punch myself when I realized that. However, there was no point in crying over spilled milk. I could still take advantage of that. I just had to convince Iruka to teach me the exercise and I could start. I would still be over half a year ahead of the class if I could manage that. Which would still be pretty awesome. Finishing a little snack to recover some stamina after training, I sat down and started meditating. I was pretty sure I was approaching another checkpoint in that skill too. I wasn't sure what it was, but I could feel it. My mind seemed to try to reach something every time I used the skill these days, and I couldn't wait to find out what I was. A little part of me wished it was natural energy, and go all sage before even being out of the academy. In the meantime, though, I just enjoyed the feeling of my chakra coursing through my body. Even after all that time had passed, I had never got over the excitement of it. The raw energy traveling through my pathways to every single part of my body was exhilarating. It was the best, plain and simple. All that vanished when I opened my eyes and the blood froze inside my veins. I wasn't looking at my apartment's room anymore. Instead, I was surrounded by white walls, a white ceiling and an extra white tiled floor. The bed I was sitting on was almost equally white, with just a light grey sheet to offer a change of color. My breath got caught on my throat as I felt a pressure on my chest, like an oppressing cold hand wrapping itself around my lungs and heart. It was a hospital room. My hospital room. Screens had popped up, but my mind didn't register them. The sight in front of me was everything I could see. As my panic grew, I desperately stood up and ran towards the only way out of the room, a door. Opening it only served to fuel my dread as I looked outside. The void. My breath quickened and I felt cold sweat slowly cover my body. My hands started shaking and my legs felt like they would give at any moment. It couldn't be happening. I had escaped that room. I had gotten out of the void. I couldn't be back. Desperately, my eyes turned towards the scroll-like screen. Surprise colored my expression as I read the messages. A deep breath did wonders to calm down my emotions, although it didn't help my body stop shaking from the shock. Meditation has gone up a level. You have unlocked your mindscape. This is my mindscape. I thought with no small amount of disgust. No, this just won't do. Looking back to the screen, I considered it. With some mental commands I tried to see if there was a skill or perk about it, but there was nothing. Taking a deep breath in, even though I was on my mindscape and shouldn't need to breath at all, I looked around willing the space to change. Slowly, the room changed into my apartment's kitchen/dining room, a small hall attached to it with a door to a bathroom and my room. Looking out through the window, I saw the void still there. This time with a calmer mind, I was able to see small almost invisible bubbles spread over the empty space. Willing one to come closer, I saw images flashing inside. Memories. I needed to protect my mind, I realized. A Yamanakar would have a field day with my literally empty mind. There was absolutely nothing to stop them from seeing everything. I couldn't let that happen. Unnecessarily cracking my neck, I set myself to work. Soon, taking advantage of all the maps I had drawn, which I could easily summon inside my mindscape, I had an altered version of Konoha as my mindscape. There were a lot of places I hadn't explored yet, but it would do. Kami bless the cartography skill. It wasn't like this for nothing. Cartography LVL9 improves the quality of maps drawn by 45%. With the base of it all set, I started placing my memories in secure places. What I did was place them inside places with meaning and behind a password. Like inside Naruto's apartment with the password "Wanna go to Ishiraku's you knuckle-headed stamina freak," or Shikamaru's house with the password "Wanna play shogi you lazy cloud watcher," and so on. I don't know how well it would work, but I willed it to be so that if someone tried to access my memories without the right passwords they would be sent right to the void, which I had placed below the ground. If it actually worked, then anyone stupid enough to try to get something out of my mind would get trapped inside that hell until they gave up. I did everything as quick as I could. I didn't want to go to bed too late. I would probably come back the next day to work on details and maybe change passwords and some places. I had to get something especially secure for my past memories after all. For now, it would do. Willing myself out of the mindscape, I was welcomed by another screen. New perk acquired, Inner Strength. Inner Strength. Increased resistance to outside control of the mind and the body. Not applied to genjutsu. Useful, really useful. I thought while grinning. I could think off the top of my head of 2 techniques that this would be almost a necessity against. The Yamanakar and the Nara techniques. Not bad for a first perk to have. Not bad at all. Looking at the clock, I cursed. Better go to bed, I had plans for tomorrow. Oh. Start. Iruka-sensei called out and I instantly activated running as usual. Right after that, I heard Kiba cursing under his breath. Poor guy never got over his loss. It only added to my amusement, to be honest. After a few laps, I heard Naruto shouting at me as I passed right next to Sasuke and him. It was the first time I had gotten a whole lap past them. That sweet decrease in the cost of running kept me going for a long time. A minute or so if my math was right. That was a long time to have double my normal speed. Just long enough to get a lap on the speed and stamina demons. And also, just enough to finally end in first place before they could caught up. Quest complete, finish the running exercise in first place. Reward. +4 running level. +1 dexterity level. Skill maxed, running. New skill acquired, free running. Sweet. I said, grinning madly at the screens. With that reward and my focused training, dexterity was already catching up with my strength. That was great news. But one could never have too much speed. I really wanted to make Lee look slow in comparison to me. No offense to Chaoji, but I had realized that speed was a lot better than strength in my spar with Sasuke. That has to be a jutsu. Naruto said for the 100th time. The only difference from all the other times was that he was pouting now. I only chuckled at him as we made our way towards the physical training area. You wish, that way you would have a chance at learning it. It's all skill, my dumb friend. I said, patting him in the shoulder. It wasn't even a lie, I thought, amused. You are so unfair. He whined. You are one to talk, you are almost a literal chakra beast. I thought to myself. We would get to that part eventually. Just give up, Naruto. It's too troublesome to try and get him to talk about his trick. You'll never get it out of him. Shikamaru said, shaking his head at us. See, he knows me. I'm disappointed in you. I thought you knew me better than that, Naruto. He just kept pouting. Does that mean we get to celebrate your first place with food again? Chaoji asked with a hopeful glint in his eyes. Shikamaru and I shared a look before I smirked at the Akimichi and shook my head. Of course. You know what? If I get my perfect score in the Shuriken Jutsu practice today, I'll prepare a feast for all of us. Shino included. I added the final part, turning towards the Aburam. I shall make myself available then. The bug lover said, pushing his sunglasses up. Thanks for the vote of confidence, buddy. I said, grinning at him. Betting against you in that would be stupid. You've been awfully close since a week ago. Shikamaru pointed out with a bored look. Everyone knows you'll achieve it any day now. Oh, I feel the love, guys. I said, wiping a non-existent tear from my eye. Oh. Your turn, Ig. Iruka said as I took my place in the shooting range. Meanwhile, I just glared at a screen in front of me. Shuriken Jutsu. Shuriken throwing LVL 10. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a shuriken by 100%. Kunai throwing LVL 9. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a kunai by 90%. Senbon throwing LVL 1. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a senbon by 10%. Just a level shy of perfection. Today was the day I would achieve it. I knew it. I would do it. A now familiar nervousness crept through my body. The shurikens left my hand as fast as I could draw them from the pouch we used during the exercise. We weren't allowed to have our own weapons until graduation after all. All the metal stars buried themselves right in the tiny yellow point in the center of every target. Some students called them perfect hits. The center of the center. I took a deep breath in as I prepared myself for the kunai part. This would take much more effort if I wanted to overcome that level I still lacked to pool of the feet. Concentrating as much as I could, I started shooting slowly this time. With every perfect hit I grew more nervous instead of the other way around, until I reached the last one. Flexing my fingers in an attempt to shake off the nervousness, I took one more kunai and readied myself. I took a shaky breath in as I saw the knife-like weapon fly off my hand and stared as it made its way towards the target in what seemed like slow motion. It hit. It hit right in the center. The center of the center. Yes. I cheered to myself before I heard Naruto echo me. With a face-splitting grin plastered on my face, I let myself be shaken by the excited blonde as I read over the new screens. Kunai throwing has gone up a level. Quest complete, achieve a perfect score in the Shuriken Jutsu exercise. Reward. +2 levels to all Shuriken Jutsu skills. I brought up the skill tree without missing a beat. Shuriken Jutsu. Shuriken throwing LVL 12. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a shuriken by 100%. Increases accuracy against a moving target with a shuriken by 20%. Kunai throwing LVL 12. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a kunai by 100%. Increases accuracy against a moving target with a shuriken by 20%. Senbon throwing LVL 3. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a senbon by 30%. I didn't even have words to explain how awesome it felt to look at the skills now. That quest reward had probably saved me months of training. This last month had been productive as fuck, if I do say so myself. We'll have a feast. An excited Chaoji seemed to realize finally, and I couldn't hold back a laugh at that. I would try my best to cook like my life depended on it. First, because this meant that I was the best of the class. I was first place in Taijutsu, Shuriken Jutsu and even the labs. Second, because I wanted to do something nice for my friends too. I wouldn't be half as good without their help in my training after all. However, I had something to do before I went home and started cooking. As everyone left the academy, I stayed behind. Iruka-sensei looked up at me from his notes. Can I do something for you, IG? Good job in the labs and the Shuriken Jutsu practice, by the way. I'm truly proud of your progress. He said, smiling at me, gesture that I returned. I was wondering if I could start training with Senbon now, sensei. I asked as confidently as I could. At the start of the year he had only said that we could ask about that later, and that was it. Maybe I was here too soon. But considering that I had already perfect accuracy in stationary targets, to keep training as I did now would be a waste of time, literally. Of course. He answered easily. I've honestly been waiting for you to ask since some time ago. He then proceeded to chuckle at my gobsmacked expression. Did you think we required you to have completely perfect accuracy to start Senbon training? While the key part of using Senbon is accuracy, having perfect aim with kunai and shuriken doesn't mean that much, as all of them are different. He explained with an indulging smile that made me feel like the kid I was supposed to be. So, yes, you can start with it during the next class on Shuriken Jutsu. Thank you, sensei. I said sincerely with as much emotion as I could muster. Also, I started again, this time much more nervously, and the scarred teacher raised a curious eyebrow at me. I was wondering if you would consider starting my chakra training early. I finished while straightening my back to stare back at the surprised teacher. I can honestly say that I'm surprised. He said with an undertone of disappointment that actually made me feel bad. It's not like you are the first one to ask that question. But you have been the perfect student so far, Ig. I didn't think you would be so eager for jutsu. That's more something that I would expect from Naruto or Kiba. He admitted. This isn't about flashy jutsu. I countered. This is about me having the power I'll need once I become a shinobi. The academy has a program especially planned to train shinobi, Ig. You'll have what you need. Yeah, I'll have what I need to be another member of the Genin Corps. I said bitterly, and I saw his shoulders sag a little. What chance do orphans like me stand against clan heirs or even clan members? They have bloodline limits, special taijutsu styles, special ninjutsu. Even the training that they get from their families is enough of an advantage. What can we orphan and civilians do against that? Even with that, you still stand at the top of the class. He tried to reason. That's because we aren't using chakra at all. If I don't get started on my training in advance, I'll start next year right where I started this one, at the bottom. I replied, containing my emotions as much as I could. I refuse to be just another core genin that takes several years just to be promoted to Chunin because I didn't have a true Jounin sensei to train me. And to get a Jounin sensei I'll need to be high enough in the class to stand right beside the clan heirs. I knew explaining the separation of genin teams and the Genin Corps was a bad idea. He said, massaging the bridge of his nose, right over his scar. Then he just sat there staring at me without saying anything, and I found myself incapable of further defending my case. The system we were talking about was simple enough. What apparently went unsaid in the manga and show was what happened to everyone that wasn't on a genin team. Because, honestly, who would believe that the academy only passed around 9 students in a good year, considering that the only people mentioned from the year prior were Team Guy? The simple version was that the students were divided in 2 groups. Those with potential and those without it. The formers would be divided in teams led by a Jounin that would both teach the genin and guide them through their missions, acting as both teacher and guard in order for the village not to lose a possible valuable asset. The latters were the Genin Corps, or basically those that didn't quite cut it. These students could still become genin, but would instead be left on their own to do D-rank missions. After some time, they would eventually gather enough standing and with some luck a few other such genin that would take C ranks with them. If they were fortunate enough, they would become Chunin after a few years. There's no need to say which group I wanted to be in. Being completely honest, I could most probably become a team member without much problem. Between the system and the sheer time I spent training, it would be easy enough. But I didn't want to just pass. No. I knew what was coming, and I wanted to be as prepared as I could. I had been neglecting my chakra training because I had too many skills to train in. Now that I had somewhat took off the weight of taijutsu, I had the time I needed to start with chakra control if I could. Now I just needed the actual knowledge. I can't give you permission to do it, Iruka said, finally making me deflate in my seat. And I also can't teach you anything related to chakra in depth until next year, he added, making my head drop. But I perked up instantly. I'll ask the higher-ups. They can give you permission to start it and me permission to teach you. But you'll have to wait for an answer, he informed me, and just sat there staring at him with wide eyes for a long moment before snapping out of it. Oh, of course, I replied quickly. I'll wait, thank you. Thank you very much, Iruka-sensei, I said, standing up and bowing to him. He just chuckled good-naturedly. I don't think you know, but I'm an orphan too. He started, and obviously I knew it, but it felt somewhat different to have him tell me about it. Most of my knowledge could be changed due to this being an or. Which it was, as was confirmed by the electives. I know exactly what you feel, IG. And like I said, you are an excellent student. I want to see you go far, for all of us orphans. He gave me a warm smile that I returned instantly. I'll make sure not to disappoint, sensei. Oh. Shikakunara POV. It had been a troublesome day. So very troublesome. I was just coming back from a long and troublesome meeting with the Hokage and his counselors. Curses were fired inside my mind towards the day that I got placed in the position of Jounin commander. It was such a drag. It had been especially troublesome due to the number of unknowns regarding the topic of the meeting. That said topic would most probably be located inside my house. Playing shogi against my son didn't help matters. I am obviously talking about one IG Sata. He had garnered the attention almost instantly at the start of the year by befriending the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, Naruto Uzumaki. And while that by itself wasn't such a worrisome thing, it did justify an instant background check. Nobody wanted to risk him being a spy or worse, a root member. Danza getting his hands in something as dangerous as a tailed beast was too troublesome. The results of that investigation had been so average that it was baffling. It almost made everyone think he was some kind of spy, if not for the fact that we had checked so many times it wasn't even funny. It was almost too average for it to be true, but alas, it was. This made even less sense as time passed. Two things happened after that. First, the boy had started to grow strong and to display some interesting abilities, nothing too impressive, but interesting nonetheless, at least at that moment. The second was him proceeding to befriend the Akimichi, Chaoji, and my son, Shikamaru. It had caused no small amount of worry for my friend, Chiza's, family and mine. We had investigated the boy once more only to come out with the same results. Yoshino and I had been keeping a close eye on him. A lot of people had tried and still tried to get close to young impressionable heirs of the powerful clans. Stupid and troublesome, the lot of them. However, the boy seemed to be a genuine friend to all three of his little circle. I would even go as far as saying that he was especially close to my son. He seemed smart enough to somewhat keep up with him, at least, and he had the will not to crumble at the evident superiority of the Nara's strategic mind, which more often than not scared the less intelligent people. The fact that he didn't seem to give up and continued to try made even me want to give it a go against him in shogi. It had been a long time since someone played against me with some actual will behind it after all. For that alone, I was grateful for the Sata's existence, if nothing else. But he had done much more than that. He had gained some favor from both the Akimichi and us, the Nara, when he got our heirs to train, if only a bit. Chiza had been over the moon when Sata got his son to start taking taijutsu training more seriously and to throw actual punches. And I was just happy that Yoshino wasn't shouting about Shikamaru napping all day. It made it easier for me to take naps. However, the troublesome boy hadn't stopped there. No, he continued to grow. His running boost had gotten faster and lasted for longer. He seemed to be able to reduce his very presence when he wanted to go unnoticed, and the way his strength and stamina grew was prodigious at the very least. That combined with the fact that he had gotten yet another heir in his circle in the form of Shino Aburam, had started to seriously worry some people. So much so that Anbu had been sent to gather information about him for a few weeks. When it was reported that he seemed to do what he was supposed to, which is to say, study, train and hang out with his friends, the patrol was removed. Now, just some weeks ago, he had defeated the last scion of the Uchiha clan. Granted, it had been more cunning and luck than actual strength and technique, but he did it nonetheless. And right after that he approached none other than the Hyuga heiress. I could only shake my head at the boy. He must have some kind of death wish. It was like he was pushing for people to notice him, which in a world like ours meant nothing but troublesome things. He probably didn't know it. His strategical knowledge wasn't that good if his matches against Shikamaru were anything to go by, but his actions were actually protecting him. A slip and he would be death faster than he can say Shinobi. But as it was, his actions kept him on the radar of a lot of people, the Aburam, the Akimichi, us and even the Hokage. Like that it was more difficult for say, Danza, to get his hands on him for his apparent bloodline limit or talent. Nobody could approach him without someone else noticing. I finally arrived to my home and started getting ready for a nap before dinner. "Welcome home," came the voice of my wife from inside the kitchen. "I'm back," I replied while already planning to go straight to sleep. That's when I distantly heard the voices of the boys. "Welcome back, Narasama," said the voice of the one that had given me extra work. Just my luck, that nap had sounded like such a good plan. "Hi, Dad," was the lazy greeting of my son. "Hello, boys, how are you doing?" I asked and kept an ear up for any detail I could get. "As always, really," the satyr answered, confirming that my son remained the better one of the two. He didn't even sound disappointed or frustrated. He was a strange one like that. "You should study more strategy and shogi instead of looking for more training," my son advised, and I stopped on my tracks. "Honestly, you just reduced your taijutsu training to add senbon training and possibly chakra control." I frowned. Adding senbon wasn't a usual decision made by academy students, or even most genin and chuunin. They required too much skill to be used properly after all. And getting to that level of skill would see that the person trying to achieve it spent most of their time on that alone. It was a dangerous decision to make. But maybe the boy just wanted something to do, as the reports said his skill on Shuriken Jutsu was perfect, at least with kunai and Shuriken. "Why, are you getting tired of winning already? Just play against your dad," the satyr suggested with an amused tone. "No, I just get tired just by knowing your training schedule. Why do you even try so hard? You are already top of the class. One would think you would relax a little. But you want to train even more." That was an interesting question, and as such it brought silence as the other boy seemed to take a moment to consider it. "You are smart, Shikamaru," the red-eyed boy pointed out, making my son snort and almost achieving the same with me. "So?" Shikamaru urged with a bored tone. "You won't fall for it if I say it's for the will of fire, will you?" the satyr asked before chuckling weakly to himself. I would be disappointed if Shikamaru did. My son seemed to have given some kind of response because the boy then continued. "It is actually true." I narrowed my eyes in suspicion. "Or, partially, at least." "How so?" Shikamaru asked with the same suspicion in his voice that I was feeling. "It's good that we are playing shogi," the boy said out of the blue, almost catching me off guard. "It helps me explain this. Shika, would you say that there's a king in real life?" he asked, and I froze where I was standing, right outside the room they were playing in. It had become somewhat of a habit to stop from time to time to listen in. From the corner of my eye, I saw that Yoshino was leaning against the doorframe of the kitchen, listening too. That had been an interesting thing to say. The Hokage. My son answered instantly without thinking. I wanted to sigh at that. He didn't get it yet. He was too young. I don't believe so. The Sartor said instantly, and I gave my full focus back to the conversation. The Hokage fights like everyone else, which means that the king is someone or something else. Maybe the kid was smarter than I thought. And what would that be? It depends on the person, I think. Sato said, and the rustle of clothes told me he shrugged. What would you fight for if someone attacked Konoha right now? He asked before scoffing, probably at my son. Don't look at me like that. There have been 3 world shinobi wars over the last 6 generations, Shika. I was actually impressed. Even Shikamaru, with his prodigious mind even for an era, was still naive enough to overlook the dangers of the world we lived in. But it was probable that being an orphan gave the boy some insight on the darker side of things. Maybe there won't be a war. Maybe we'll be lucky. The boy continued. But we still will eventually go out there, probably with a team, in missions that will be dangerous. I don't want it to be my fault when a team member dies. I don't want it to be my fault if someone I know is killed or worse. I noticed that he said when and not if at first. He really had his eyes open to the truth, apparently. I didn't know if that was good or bad. Time passed, but neither the boys nor Yoshino nor me showed signs of moving. The only sound in the house was that of the pieces on the shogi board being moved occasionally. I moved to the kitchen in order to stand beside my wife as I considered the boy that was currently playing against my son. The silence was eventually broken though. And what was said brought a beaming smile to my wife's face and swell of pride inside me. IG. Are you up for a spa? 2 days after my chat with Iruka-sensei, I added Senbon to my Shuriken Jutsu practice. It didn't go too well, but it wasn't horrible, probably due to the level of the skill. That didn't make throwing them any less uncomfortable. They were completely different to kunai and shuriken, which were the things I was used to. So, the first couple of classes the skill didn't really go up at all. Once I got the gist of it though, it skyrocketed to this. Shuriken Jutsu. Shuriken throwing LVL 12. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a shuriken by 100%. Increases accuracy against a moving target with a shuriken by 20%. Kunai throwing LVL 12. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a kunai by 100%. Increases accuracy against a moving target with a kunai by 20%. Senbon throwing LVL 7. Increases accuracy against a stationary target with a senbon by 70%. It leveled a lot faster than its counterparts had, which surprised me quite a bit at first. It didn't take me long to formulate a decent theory about the reason though. My best guess was that its fast development was due to a combination of my improved dexterity stat and me already having a decent accuracy with other Shuriken Jutsu weapons. Sadly, as showed, the other skills didn't go up much or at all. I guessed they would stay the same until we started practicing with moving targets, which Iruka had confirmed would happen after the first half of the academic year. That meant those skills would stay the same for a month and a half. It didn't bother me too much, I had enough skills to deal with as it was. An interesting development was that there were a couple of people that followed me into taking Senbon too. Those were Sasuke, Ino, and much to the surprise of everybody, Shikamaru. Everybody but me, that is. After our little chat while playing shogi, my friend had started training more. He wasn't a hard worker by any means, we wouldn't get rid of his lazy nature anytime soon, it seemed. But he did start joining our spars more often. He had also started working a lot on his shuriken jutsu, a lot for someone like him at least. I was just happy he was taking his training more seriously. His newfound motivation didn't go unnoticed by our other friends for long. The reactions had been varied, but ultimately, all of them had ended confused. Confused by his explanation, that is. "I'll train for the sake of my unremarkable life," he had said. Nobody besides me got his meaning, but they stopped asking after a while. However, it did have one more consequence, and that was that it motivated everyone to train harder. Naruto and Choji started to spar almost all the time while we stayed in any of the two clan compounds. Shino even started hanging out with us more, and he joined Shikamaru and me in our extra shuriken jutsu training. One more change to my everyday routine was the addition free running. Once I took a look at it, it had instantly replaced running as favorite skill. Free running, active, LVL1. When used, increases the speed of the user while running by 5%. When used, increases the strength of the user while jumping by 5%. When used, increases the strength of the user while maneuvering by 5%. Consumption 20 energy points per second. It was a beautiful sight. As I found out with time, it escalated a little slower than running, as it was only 5% every level. But I guessed it would ultimately be the same if it didn't stop at level 10 like its predecessor had. It was also more expensive, but its cost dropped by 1 point every 2 levels apparently, which meant that the cost would ultimately be 10 if it stopped at level 20. Those were good numbers in my opinion. It was more expensive, but it offered much more than running did. It was worth it for me. Also, free running was so much more fun than simple running. It quickly became my favorite hobby as of that moment. I couldn't wait for the buffs to be maxed and start jumping from building to building like those parkour videos I had seen in my previous life. That would be just plain awesome. For now though, I just trained the skill without activating it to save energy while on my way to the academy and actively while on my free time after classes. On a completely unrelated note, I had finally gotten Shikamaru to use his thinking posture while playing. At the moment, I didn't know if I should feel proud or dejected. That match hadn't lasted long after that, after all. Ultimately, I just decided to be proud. Shikamaru had been in an unusually good mood after that, so I took it as a win. This were all the changes that my routine suffered during my 5th month in the Naruto world. Which isn't to say that those were the only things of notice. Oh, no. A lot more happened, and when I say a lot, I mean a lot. Oh. Sata. The sound of the voice alone was enough to silence the whole classroom right when everyone was preparing themselves to leave for the day. After all, it wasn't very often that we heard the last Uchiha talking, much less calling out to someone. My red eyes moved through the room until they fell on the dark-haired boy. Uchiha? I asked in the same tone he had talked. I got it, he suffered and suffers a lot. But his broodiness was just a bit too much. It bothered me, even if I understood. Can I talk to you for a moment? He asked, almost politely. Want us to wait for you, IG? Shino asked. We had been preparing ourselves for our daily stealth practice after all. Go ahead, guys. I'll meet you at Choji's house. They gave several replies and goodbyes before leaving the room. The rest of the class stayed there, probably to gossip about whatever Sasuke wanted to talk about. I groaned. Better a change of scenery, don't you think? I asked him and he nodded with an annoyed scowl. For once, I didn't reproach his expression internally. After that, He left the room and I followed while rolling my eyes. He just left expecting me to go behind him. I couldn't wait to beat him for real in a spa. Maybe that would shake him out of his Avenger thoughts. Some classmates even had the audacity to follow us, and he groaned again as he guided me to the Uchiha compound. It was pretty far actually, must have been a pain for him to do the trip every day. Looking around, it gave a new perspective to the survivor's constant mood. I would be like that if I lived alone in such a big place. He probably was reminded of a lot of memories just by being there too. If we ever got close, the first thing I would do would be to get him out of the place. It was a constant source of pain for the last Uchiha, that was for sure. So, what did you want to talk about? I asked as we entered his house and sat in a table. He didn't offer anything, but at this point I was beyond expecting any kindness or politeness from him. How did you get so strong? He asked bluntly, and I resisted the urge to sigh. I was prepared for this chat. I truly was. But I just hoped he would be better than that. Training. I replied simply, and he scowled at me. I train too. Every free hour I have is spent training. That can't be the only thing. He countered, and I contemplated the idea of evading his question and just getting out. However, he would probably continue asking if I didn't answer. Well, that can be one reason. Training all the time will end up hindering your growth instead of the opposite. You need rest too. Your diet can be another factor. I explained, and his scowl slowly disappeared, giving place to a thoughtful expression. Anything else? He asked, his tone much more inviting than before. I looked at him for a moment, considering my next words. This could change his life, or it could push him even more down his hate-filled hole. Besides what I said. Is there any difference you see between the two of us? I asked, unsure, and he stared at me in confusion before speaking. We have different pasts. We both are orphans, but there are big differences still. He said, his whole body language screamed guarded. I suppressed a sigh. Of course, he would say something like that. It's why Naruto's attempt to relate hadn't worked in canon. That's why I wasn't going for that argument. I meant in a more recent manner. I clarified, and he took another moment to think. You mean, the others? Bingo, I thought to myself while suppressing a smile. Yeah. I won't tell you that friendship gave me power or something like that. I explained quickly as I saw him scowl again. But they help a lot in my training. We train together in Shuriken Jutsu, usually pointing the other's mistakes and helping correcting them. We also spar together to practice Taijutsu. Doing the kata exercises is all well and good, but actual spars help a lot too. We also do stealth practice after school almost every day. I told him, trying and possibly failing to contain my excitement. If I got Sasuke to be part of the group, we could save him from leaving, giving him a much deeper connection than what he had with Naruto in canon. HN. Oh, there was the grunt. I was wondering if the fanfics had been exaggerating. I see. He added as if to translate his previous grunt, and then stood up. I guessed that was all. After this, I could only hope my words would be enough. I had done what I could. Maybe an actual beating would help. Well, if that was all. I said, standing up myself and following him back to the entrance. See you tomorrow. See you. He said curtly before he seemed to hesitate for a second. Thank you. And then he closed the door. I smiled to myself. That wasn't fantastic, but I thought it went pretty well, if I do say so myself. Oh. Honestly, I don't know why you bothered answering his questions. He just wants to beat you, believe it," said an annoyed Naruto while I just rolled my eyes. "So? I don't care. And even if I did, it'll just mean that I have one more person to challenge me," I said dismissively, getting a groan out of Shikamaru. "Why do you have to make things so troublesome for yourself? It doesn't even involve me and it still bothers me," he said while lying on the ground. "Can you stop looking for excuses to stop doing your exercises?" I asked, amused, and he groaned again. "Why do you have to always ruin it?" he complained while starting with his sit-ups again. "All for your unremarkable life, isn't it?" I shot back and he groaned but stayed silent this time. "Someday you'll have to tell us what the hell is that all about," Naruto said, getting a firm nod from Choji. "You'll understand when you are older," I replied, and instantly ignored their oi, cry and Shikamaru's snort. It became even easier as something called for my attention. Constitution has gone up a level. New perk acquired, Autodidact. Autodidact improves the rate at which the user's stats and skills improve when training without a teacher by 10%. Cool. Wait, why the hell did I get this perk while in class? It has something to do with the constitution point, but... Status: IG SATA. Title: Academy Student. Energy points: 400/400. Chakra points: 180/180. Strength: 18. Dexterity: 18. Constitution: 20. Chakra: 18. Chakra control: E. Something to do with getting to 20 points in Constitution. No, the specific stat wouldn't make sense. Just the number 20. But then, why 20? And why during class? I couldn't quite make sense of it no matter how much I tried, until in the end, I decided to just give up. Doesn't matter. I won't complain because of a free perk, I thought while internally shrugging. It was a great perk too, so I counted that as a win either way. Especially now that my progress had slowed down a lot both in stats and skills. I just had to look at strength and dexterity. Despite physical conditioning's incredible buff, the latter still had caught up to the former. Still, I was sure strength would go up any moment, but it was still concerning. After the 20s it would be a pain to level my stats, I just knew it. Maybe I'll have to look up the price for some weights. I grimaced at the very thought. I didn't exactly have much money saved. I wouldn't blame having to feed Naruto for that though, he paid for his own food after all. No, the problem was that all my training had me eating like a shounen main character. Not to mention that I had to save money to equip myself once I graduated from the academy. And considering that Bukajutsu was one of the classes I was considering taking, whatever weapon I chose to train with would have to be bought too. I sighed. I might need to get a job. And with that thought, I spent the rest of the classes thinking about what to do. I could probably get a job at Ishiraku's with my cooking maxed, but I probably wouldn't win much there. Poor Naruto wasn't doing the place any favors by promoting it, not that anyone could blame that on him. However, there were other places where I could apply that skill for work. Or there was the fanfic normal route of applying at Higurashi's. Although, I wasn't sure I would gain much considering that I didn't have skills to apply there. And I didn't think they would employ me for much if I didn't know anything related to the job. An apprenticeship would be cool, yes, but it also would be time-consuming. The job by itself would set me back by a lot, if I also had to train for it outside of there. No, it was better to do something I was already prepared for. A restaurant would do just fine. Ig, can you stay for a moment after classes? Iruka called out as everyone was readying to leave. Can you guys wait for me? I really don't want to lose another day, and sensei shouldn't take too much time with whatever this is about. I asked my group of friends. They nodded without a thought and left the room. I meant my words thought. I really didn't feel like missing another day of training with them. After my little chat with Sajuk the day before, I had to go directly to my apartment. His compound was almost on the other side of the village, so between the walk there, the time spent with our conversation and the way back, half my free time had been wasted. You wanted to talk to me, sensei? Yes. He nodded, looking over his papers before looking at me from across the desk. This is about what you talked with me the other day. My eyes widened. My chakra training. I've been given permission to start training you in chakra control exercises, if. He added quickly as I was about to do a most definitely lame victory dance. I looked back at him instantly. If you maintain your current level in all the exercises and only after the mid-year exams. If you pass them in the first place, I'll start your chakra training, but only in chakra control. I stared at him with one of my biggest grins yet. What did it matter if it was only chakra control? It would be a huge help to me if I decided to take a chakra-based elective the next year. Just getting 1 or 2 levels over the others would reduce the hit my standing in the class would suffer once we started using chakra. It was enough for me. One more thing. My full attention was once again turned to the scarred teacher. You will only train chakra control, as I said. I don't want to be even partly responsible for your death because you tried to do something stupid like strengthening your muscles and ended up blowing them up. I resisted the urge to gulp. That had been an idea, I thought sheepishly. Iruka seemed to see right through me though, and gave me a disappointed shake of his head before continuing. Keep yourself only on chakra control exercises, and if you get far enough and maintain your place at the top of the class. He made a dramatic pause with a smirk as I hung on the edge of my seat. And you will be allowed a third elective. Now, most of my class would think that was a punishment. I mean, more classes. Who wanted more classes? Well, me, as a matter of fact. My friends were already calling me a training maniac, and I would gladly receive that title if it got me closer to dealing with all the shit that would come with a few less deaths and a little less suffering. This wasn't about me surviving anymore, it was about all of us surviving. Yes. I all but shouted as I looked intently at his eyes. I'll do it. I won't disappoint you, Iruka-sensei. I'll be Rookie of the Year, just you wait. I said with confidence. I was already pretty confident before, but with this. It was almost a fact. Not that I would let that slow my training. No, the thought of Madara and Kaguya was enough to instantly vanish any overconfidence I could have had. I'll be waiting. He replied with a warm smile. See you, sensei. I have to start preparing. Oh. In OPOV. Do we have to have dinner with them? We just met at the Akimichi compound last week. I complained, making an effort not to sound whiny. I really didn't need to deal with my father telling me that I was adorable while doing so. It was so embarrassing. Mum had started using that as a threat, an effective one at that. Yes, we have to. They are family friends and clan allies. Mum shut down any little hope I could have had instantly, and I had to resist the urge to groan. I understood, I really did. But meeting the Akimichi head family and the Nara head family was something that we did every single week. Furthermore, while Shikamaru and Chaoji weren't the worst people to hang around, there was only so much laziness and gluttony that I could put up with. What was worse, now they regularly hung out with Naruto and Shino. The former being almost as bad as Chaoji when regarding food, not to mention his obnoxious personality and his hideous outfit. And then there was the Aburam, who was just plain creepy. The only remotely normal person on the group was Ig. I had my own problem in regards to the satyr. He had been in my mind more than I would like to admit out loud, or at all. But ever since he had beaten Kiba on the lap runs, his presence had been intriguing to say the least. It had been a good change, to be honest, having someone break the semblance of normalcy that had formed the previous year. There hadn't been surprises at all back then. The clan heirs had been at the top, Sasuke had been the top of the top. Shikamaru was lazy. Chaoji liked to eat. You could barely know Shino was there. Sakura blinded you with the shine of her massive forehead. Hinata was so shy you barely remembered her normal voice. Kiba and Naruto were a complete headache. And there was me, being just plain awesome. But then the new year started. A kid came out of nowhere and challenged the established system, and one couldn't help but wonder, what would he do next to break our perception of normalcy? Because he seemed to take it as a life mission to destroy anything you thought was a fact. He caught up with the fastest of the class and eventually surpassed them. He took the first place of the Taijutsu spars. He was the very first to get an absolutely perfect round in Shuriken Jutsu practice and take up Senbon training. What the hell would he do now that he didn't have any more of things to take over in class? And it wasn't even that he only surprised during class. Oh, no, there was much more. Like being the first to befriend Naruto. It took a special kind of patience to put up with the boy after all. Then he went and befriended Shikamaru and Chaoji. And he got Chaoji to fight. It blew my mind. How had he managed to make that gentle soul throw punches? But that wasn't all, no. The thing that had made me give up logic wasn't even the fact that he beat Sasuke, however underhand, in a spar. No, it was that he made Shikamaru get up from his stupid shogi board and freaking train. It was like he was taking the rules of the world and throwing them out the window. At some point it had gone from interesting to annoying. It gave me the feeling that the world around me was being torn apart. We are here, Ino-chan. My father broke me from my thoughts and my shoulders sagged in defeat. I would have to put up with the weirdo group once again, it would seem. It had become somewhat normal to do so. Sometimes Naruto wouldn't be there, or maybe Ig. But there was almost always at least one of them. Nowadays, Shino would be there too from time to time. Arag. That posture has to be a cheat of some kind. It just has to be. I heard a voice complain and I rolled my eyes. Even I knew this argument was old. Just give up, Ig. Us, lesser ones, must just accept the stupidly overpowered mind of the Naras. Said the Akimichi clan head in a joking voice. I refuse. I'll beat you. It'll happen, mark my words. The red-eyed boy replied with confidence and I snorted. Nobody could beat a Nara in shogi. It just didn't happen. And then I froze. I just jinxed it, didn't I? Ino-chan. Greeted animatedly my only fellow blonde in class, Naruto. I forced a polite smile and greeted back. I didn't feel like putting up with my parents after the meeting, again. Hello, Naruto. How have you been? Never mind that we had left the same classroom not more than a few hours ago. I just had to ask for politeness sake or I would get a scolding from Mum. We've been great. Chaoji and I just decided to take a break from our spas. And Ig and Shikamaru, well, you know how it goes. And I couldn't help but nod in agreement. It was rare to see those two together without them playing against each other. Although, now that Shikamaru trained from time to time, they could also be found doing that. The mere thought still felt strange. I wonder when he'll give up. I mused, mostly to myself. He won't. The knucklehead answered instantly. He will. Nobody beats Inara in shogi. I countered instantly. I bet you would have said the same thing about Sajukta Minatajutsu Spa. He shot back and I had to bite my tongue in order not to lash out. Everybody knew that Naruto and Sasuke didn't get along. Everybody also knew that the blonde took great pleasure in bragging about his friend's victory over the last Uchiha. Although I had never seen the actual miracle maker do any bragging, it was strange. It was a cheap trick. I said, trying to make the statement sound as strong as I could. It was in vain though. I knew that wasn't a good excuse. Ninja didn't fight fair, no matter how much Forehead wanted to believe they did. Honestly, she was too smart to believe shit like that. Apparently though, I was wrong. Yeah, keep telling yourself that. I felt my eyebrow twitching. You could at least brag about something you did instead of what others do. I said this time and it was his turn to twitch. Ha, take that you fashion disaster. Naruto, we are guests here. And it's the meeting of the 3 clan head families. We shouldn't even be here. Play nice. Ig chided from where he sat, facing away, just as Naruto was about to reply something. Ha, they really knew each other well. The blonde slumped as he turned towards his friends. Okay, I won that argument though. I felt myself getting annoyed once more before taking a deep breath to keep myself from lashing out. My mum was sure to be staring a hole through the back of my head right that moment. And honestly, do you want to get into an argument with her? Ig asked with an amused expression and I went still. Have you seen her chats with Sakura? We would be here all night. He finished while chuckling and getting a snort from all the others as Naruto mock shivered. Thanks for that, Ig. You saved me. Anytime, go dame. He said, mock beaming at his friend. This time it took several deep breaths to calm myself down as I sat at the table with the rest of the adults. Most of them watching intently at the shogi match going on between the 2 boys as the rest of the little group talked between themselves around the board. Soon enough, the satyr was defeated once again and groaned. Someday. He grumbled to himself. Never happening. I couldn't help but say. Ino. My mother called out with a chiding tone and I stopped myself from shrugging. Doesn't matter, I'll just prove her wrong, as I did when I beat Sasuke at everything. I hated the raven-haired boy's good-naturedly tone as he spoke, shooting a reassuring smile at my mother. I hated the way the clanless orphan had come to speak so freely with clan heads. And they loved it. How many logic rules would he break? All the chatting stopped though, when we heard a knock on the door. Yoshino stood up excusing herself and walked towards the entrance to see who it was. As the door opened, the temperature of the room seemed to drop dramatically as an Anbu was spotted just out the doorstep. Did something happen? It was shocking contrast to see Shikakunara go from a lazy old version of Shikamaru to someone that made your back straighten with just 3 words. I didn't even notice that the Nara clan head had moved until I saw him standing right beside his wife. I'm here for Uzumaki-san. All eyes turned to Naruto as his face showed both nervousness and fear. What happened? He asked in a shaky voice. There was an attack to your apartment. The Anbu replied. If you would follow me. I have orders from the Hokage to take you there in order for you to look for things that may have survived the attack and then take you to him. Can I go too? This time the attention turned to a red-eyed raven-haired boy. I felt my breath caught up in my throat. I had seen IG annoyed, he was pretty much every time Kiba opened his mouth. I had seen him determined every time he participated in any activity at the academy. I had even seen him angry, whenever Kiba said something about Naruto or any of his friends. This IG though, I had never seen. His words were polite and unassuming. His tone though. My eyes couldn't help but travel towards Shikaku, who was eyeing the boy with an unreadable expression. However, his voice was one of the least important things to notice. Not even his impassive and cold expression that clashed spectacularly with his normally easygoing attitude. No, the most shocking thing that I saw in him at that moment were his eyes. I had never noticed how much his eyes resembled the color of blood. I was tasked with taking just Uzumaki-san with me. The Anbu replied as if not noticing the boy's demeanor or not caring about it. Can he come with me? Naruto asked, his voice laced with something that I couldn't place as his expression turned to one I had never seen in him, dejection. Take the boy too. Shikaku told the Anbu, who instantly nodded. Yes, Narasama. If you would. And then the ninja extended both arms towards the boys, who took them without hesitation, and then they vanished. Not before I could take another look at Ige's eyes and felt a chill run down my spine. Damn it. My fist impacted with the scratched wall. Naruto's apartment laid in front of me, looking like a tornado had passed right through it. There was nothing left unscathed. Everything was either broken or torn to pieces. Graffitis covered the walls slandering my blonde friend. And I had to watch it. I had to watch the damage and my first friend going through the remains in search of something, anything that could be salvaged. It's safe. The owner of the thrashed apartment shouted, excited, as he lifted something from in between some broken pieces of wood that could have been a shelf. It was a bowl of ramen. Even through my anger and sadness, that sight brought a tiny smile to my face. I know you like ramen, Naruto. But you should check your priorities. I commented in a tired voice. The Anbu remained silent just out the door. It's not that, replied a sheepish Naruto as he held the bowl in an embrace. It's the bowl where you put the first batch of ramen you prepared for me. He explained, looking at the trash-covered floor, and I could help but stare at him as a simple thought took place firmly inside my mind: whoever did this better pray I don't find them. Is there something else? I asked, trying to keep my voice as normal as was possible with an emotive lump on my throat. When he went back to searching, I turned towards the Anbu. Is there a suspect for this? I asked evenly. The ninja regarded me in silence for a long time, as if deciding if he should even bother answering my question. I understood. I was a nobody, a clanless orphan. The only thing distancing myself from a beggar was my place in the academy as a student, but that made little difference, really. It's been investigated, he said after a while, and I was just surprised he answered at all. Still, I nodded in acknowledgement. I prayed to every god I knew that the culprit would suffer. I'm done. I turned towards Naruto. He had the bowl and his toad-shaped wallet. That was it. I felt my blood boiling once more, but I controlled myself. I needed to be here for Naruto now. The Anbu placed his hands on our shoulders and I braced myself. In other circumstances, I would crack a joke or simply complain like the child I was about how awful side-along Shunshin apparently was. It felt like being in a super-powered roller coaster. As it was though, I kept my mouth shut because I knew that if talked too much I would start ranting about the injustice of the stupid village. A moment later, the three of us stood inside the Hokage office. There didn't seem to be anyone else inside, although I was sure there were Anbu guards somewhere. The village leader looked entirely unaffected by the events of the night and I was just about to tell him something about it when I froze. His eyes told me a different story. He was just as angry as I was. Good. Was that everything you could get, Naruto? He asked, his tone was completely neutral. The blonde boy beside me nodded weakly looking down. With a nod of his own, the Hokage dismissed the Anbu, who instantly vanished. You could have left the bowl there. I'll provide you with new things in regards to that. He said turning back to us. It's important. Naruto said while shaking his head. When he didn't explain further before the elder man spoke again. I see. And after that silence permeated the room for long minutes before he proceeded, I'll provide you with a new place to stay, Naruto. Is there anything you would like in your new home? He asked, and if he was of the same mind as me, he would provide just about anything that Naruto asked. I let out a small smile. As shitty the whole situation was, I was happy for Naruto. He often complained about our apartments. They were really small. They didn't have any outside space aside from the tiny balcony. The kitchens sucked. There was barely space to keep our things. So, I waited to hear what he would ask for. Maybe a house, with a big backyard so that we could hang out there too, aside from the others' compounds. Maybe a library that he would ask to be filled with awesome jutsu scrolls. Oh, I knew, he would surely ask for. I want enough space for IG to live with me. My mind went blank as my brain rebooted. Whatever I expected him to ask, that wasn't it. I turned towards him but he kept his eyes firmly locked on the Hokage's. Surely you know that your friend will be okay, Naruto. The leader replied. You can ask for other things and have him visit you. He'll be okay. He explained. It doesn't matter. Naruto continued stubbornly before his expression softened. I can't. I just can't go and live in a fancy place while he stays in those crappy apartments by himself. While he spoke, I struggled with my own emotions. Apparently, they didn't know if I should cry or smile at my friend's speech. You know. This bowl. He put it up for the Hokage to get a better look. It's where he put the first batch of ramen that he made for me. His expression and his voice denoted the struggle he was going through. Naruto, I don't think making a ramen for you accounts for. He made food for me. The blonde interrupted, getting a raised eyebrow from the Hokage. It hurt me just to hear him. His voice never should be so low and sad. It just wasn't him. He made food for me when no one but Ishiraku's would sell it to me. I gave him my money and he made food for me, every time I asked. It should be a testament to how much the leader of the village cared for Naruto that I saw his calm mask crack at that moment. It was almost unnoticeable, but I saw his eyes harden and his jaw clench in suppressed anger for just a moment. Not to mention that the room's temperature seemed to drop a little. I gulped and continued looking between the two of them. I had no place in this conversation. What do you mean no one would sell it to you? The Hokage asked, his tone hiding everything that I had noticed. No restaurant would sell me food. The stores that would sell me ingredients would do so with really high prices. Naruto explained, his voice barely a whisper. There was a long pause after that in which Naruto stubbornly looked at the floor. The Hokage kept a stony expression and I didn't know quite what to do. I had met the Hokage a few times when he decided to visit Naruto. But they went mostly by themselves, and if I was there, I just stayed silent while they talked. It was clear to anyone that looked that the leader of Konoha saw Naruto as a grandchild of sorts. But I was just another academy student. I see, was the response of the Sun Dame, and after those two words silence made its presence known once more as no one knew quite what to say or do. So, can I? Naruto asked, his voice regaining a bit of his former confidence. Can I have a place where the two of us can live together? Slowly, his tone raised, and I grew worried of the Hokage's reaction. I don't want to live in a fancy place while he stays in those shitty apartments. He's a friend, believe it. You can, was his answer after a moment of consideration, and I could help but bow my head in appreciation. I'll arrange for a place for you two. For now, Naruto, could you leave me alone with IG for a minute? I have something to discuss with him. I gulped as Naruto looked between us a few times before slowly leaving the room. Not a moment had passed before I felt my own body grow heavy just by having the full attention of the man who held the title of Shinobi no Kami. He could wipe me from existence with a mere twitch, I was sure. Is there anything else Naruto hasn't told me about the treatment he receives from the village? The Hokage asked with his eyes boring holes on my skull. I gulped again before speaking. I don't know. When I saw the hint of a frown on his expression, I quickly started talking again. When we walk on the streets, people glare, scowl, some even curse at him. More often than not with the word demon mentioned at least once. As he told you, there aren't many that would sell him food. I suspect that there aren't many that would sell him anything, for that matter. I racked my brain searching for anything else to say before sighing. I don't know much more. We've stayed within our group of friends, I said in the end while looking at my feet. You've been a good friend to Naruto. He mused after a long moment, although it seemed to be mostly for himself than for me, so I stayed silent. You don't have to be so nervous around me. I am grateful that you were there for him while I wasn't. I sometimes forget that the title of Hokage or Shinobi no Kami doesn't automatically mean that I know everything that goes on inside the village. I took a deep breath in to try and calm myself. I couldn't help but hesitate before speaking. Speaking freely to authority figures was Naruto's thing. He was the main protagonist and he also had his talk jutsu. I didn't have either of those. Angering any of those could and most probably would end with my death. If we live together, I may start getting the same treatment. There aren't many that have done so until now, but it may become a real concern. So, you decline his offer? The Hokage asked, his tone and expression unreadable. No, not really, I said quickly while fidgeting with my fingers. It's just, we'll need help if that happens, I said while gulping once more. The damn lump on my throat refused to go down. I see. That's a reasonable fear, he said while humming and looking out the window for some long seconds. I idly realized that this was probably the most we had talked to one another. I'll have someone restock your kitchen of everything you may need regularly, he explained after a moment. For everything else that you aren't able to procure yourself due to this, I urge you to ask a teacher at the academy or anyone with Jounin rank for assistance. He advised, and I quickly nodded. Of course, thank you, Hokage-sama. I said respectfully, bowing my head. That was a great reassurance for me. I had been growing worried ever since the first shop tried to overprice me. As I said, you can relax in my presence, IG. He said, this time his impassive face gave place to a reassuring smile. At that moment, I decided to do something exceedingly stupid. But what can I say? Naruto and his friendship speeches must have gotten to me. Would it be too much if I asked why? I asked nervously, and he raised an eyebrow. Why Naruto is treated the way he is? I forced myself to say. Internally, I kept repeating to myself that it was a completely reasonable question. Not that it helped my growing fear as a frown threatened to appear in the Hokage's face. In the end, he sighed before once more looking out the window deep in thought. What if I said that the Kyuubi didn't die in the battle with the Yondaime? He asked, and I didn't have to fake my surprise. I was shocked that he would actually answer, and with the truth. Hokage-sama? I asked, my voice merely a whisper. You see, killing a creature made entirely out of chakra isn't an easy feat, if possible, at all. He continued. His gaze firmly set on the village's landscape that could be seen from his office. So, the Yondaime chose the next best option. To seal it. Have you learned anything about seals in class? He asked, as if asking about the weather, and I took a moment to choke out my answer. Some. We've learned mostly about storage and explosive seals. Their uses, that is. Much like with a storage seal, he sealed the Kyuubi away. The problem is, sealing a chakra beast inside an inanimate object or an animal isn't an easy feat in normal circumstances, much less in the middle of an attack, as was the case back then. He explained. So, our Yondaime had to seal it inside a person. A baby, to be exact. Naruto. I whispered, my facade was kept intact by the fact that I was genuinely affected by my friend's fate. He really didn't deserve any of this shit. And from then on, he was seen as nothing but the very beast he contains by most people in this village. Contrary to our Yondaime's wishes of him being considered a hero for imprisoning the Kyuubi. The tale ended and silence reigned the office once more, this time heavier than before. I'm curious though. What are your thoughts in the matter, IG? If you expect me to turn my back on him, I spoke with much more confidence than any other time while in the company of the Hokage. Then you will be severely disappointed. This time, the smile the man gave me looked different. I'm pleased to hear that, truly I am. He said as he hummed in approval. Sadly, I must ask you to keep this a secret. I stayed silent for a moment, to see if he had something else to say, before answering. If I may ask why? I asked hesitantly. I didn't know if I was pushing boundaries, maybe I had been for the whole conversation. I wonder that myself sometimes. He said, and for a split second he looked exactly like the very old leader he was, like the man that had survived 3 world wars while seeing his people die. For the same length of time, I wondered to myself why he was being so open with me. I was just a kid that was friendly with Naruto. Naruto meant a lot to Hiruzen, but this was strange, at the very least. As it is, the reveal of this knowledge could make your group have a different reaction than yours. He finished. I don't believe that would be the case. I knew we could trust Shika and Chaoji, at the very least. I wanted to trust Shino, but he hadn't joined our group until 2 months ago and he kept mostly to himself for most of that time. But I'll keep it a secret, Hokage-sama. I have lived for long and through a lot, IG. He replied. I know when someone lies to me. I winced and looked away before sighing. I can't promise that I won't tell them if I feel they need to know. I admitted, preparing myself for whatever he decided to do with me. Maybe a Yamanaka would be called to deal with my memory of the Konoha. Understandable. I was, once again, baffled by the openness he showed. Why? I was able to gasp out and he directed a warm smile towards me before looking to the side. You remind me of someone. Turning to follow his eyes, I saw a row of frames in the wall. Frames of the previous Hokage of Konoha. I didn't have to be a Naruto to know who he was referring to. No pressure. I thought nervously to myself. I believe your new home arrangements have been taken care of, IG. Naruto must be waiting for you to go with him to see it and get settled in. I nodded slowly, my gaze still locked with the picture of a blonde man with blue eyes, much too similar to my friend. I didn't even bother questioning how he had gotten a house so fast and without asking anyone to do it. He was the freaking Hokage, things like this shouldn't be too surprising. I turned my head to the Sundame and nodded once more, this time with a completely different meaning, gesture that he returned with a small smile. Turning around and leaving the office, I felt much more determined than I ever did. Despite what many would think, I didn't feel detached from this world even though I had first known about it as a simple entertainment. No, I had lived in it for months, talked to its people, interacted with the village. And I had made friends inside it. I had done the opposite to what one would expect. I had grown attached to it. So, it was with a great deal of pride that I took the expectations the Sundame placed on me and held my head high as I stepped outside the room. However, that thought left me pretty quickly as my eyes landed on Naruto. Because growing attached to this world meant something else too. I had grown to care about some of its inhabitants, about my friends. Someone would have to pay for hurting my friend. Oh. After another absolutely nauseating trip via Shunshin by another Anbu, Naruto and I stood in front of a small 2-story house that looked cozy. My Jinchuriki friend whispered, almost in awe of the place. It does look like that, I said with a small smile. Let's have a look inside, shall we? I asked before turning to the Anbu, who already had extended an arm holding the keys to the place. Hokage-sama said the taxes would be taken care of until your graduation. She informed us and I nodded while taking the keys and looking them over. Once my eyes went up again, she wasn't there anymore. I resisted the urge to sigh. They are awesome, aren't they? Naruto said while looking at the spot where the Anbu had been standing. He was grinning, but he wasn't fooling me. He was much more subdued than I had ever seen him. I put a hand on his shoulder and we moved towards the house. Stepping in, we were received by a small entrance hall. The rest of the ground floor was occupied by a dining room, a kitchen, a sitting room, a laundry room and a toilet room. The first floor had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Everything was pretty small, but considering that it would be just the 2 of us and maybe a guest, it was more than enough. Maybe it would be even less, considering that we could turn the 3rd bedroom into a workshop or something. Something to think about. However, what really had both of us looking around in awe was the garden. There was enough space for a sparring circle, and some mid-range shurinjutsu. Look at all this space. Naruto laughed madly while spinning as if trying to take in everything at the same time. Although, we definitely have to put some plants here, it looks so boring. He added, almost pouting, and I sighed. Make it short-range shuriken jutsu, I thought to myself. Still, I had a smile through the whole tour before I frowned as I looked at the clock. We should go to bed. Or we won't wake up on time tomorrow. I reminded Naruto, making him look at me scandalized. How can you think about school when we have a new house? We have a new house. Do you follow me? He said, looking at me like I had said ramen was the worst kind of food. And we have classes tomorrow. I replied while doing my best to keep a straight face. His whole head twitched as if his brain was shaking, trying to understand what I was talking about, and I wasn't able to hold it anymore. My blonde friend could only pout and grumble as I held my stomach in laughter. You are so mean sometimes, IG. He said, crossing his arms and looking away. I wiped a tear from my eye and I put my hand on his head as if he was a child. His pout intensified. What do you say about checking if the kitchen has enough to make ramen? I asked, and his expression changed to an eager one instantly. I shook my head as he started running towards the kitchen. What kind of question is that? He shouted from inside, probably already sitting in the dining room. I was proven wrong though, as when I was entering the house once more through the garden door, I saw Naruto placing the bowl he had taken from his apartment on a shelf. I stopped on my tracks to look at him. You did wash that thing, didn't you? I asked, and he froze before turning to me, sweating bullets and scratching the back of his neck. Go wash it while I cook. I'm not going to touch it. I shook my head as he started washing it, a smile firmly on my face though. It didn't take long for Naruto's excitement to wash off, probably due to everything that had happened during the day. Even he had his limits sometimes. Soon, I found myself sitting on the dining room with the distant sound of my friend's snores coming through from the first floor. The only light on in the ground floor was that of the kitchen, showering my back and projecting my shadow over the table in front of me. I sat there, pondering over what had happened and what I would do about it. Because no matter what he acted like, I knew Naruto had been hurt. He had been through a lot, but this kind of thing didn't happen often. At least lately, as I had never seen it happen during the months I had been here. Suddenly, my musings were stopped as I saw a blur move in front of me and vanish as quickly as it had appeared. Blinking, I was about to dismiss it as just me being tired, but that was proven wrong when I saw a small note, innocently sitting at the end of my shadow over the table. Hesitantly standing up, I walked around the wooden piece of furniture until I took the piece of paper in my hand. In it were just a few words. Kobu in Yuzuka. What are you going to do? Oh. Third person POV. You told him. Danza said, his tone as neutral as his expression. I did. Hiruzen nodded, his face and voice mimicking that of what people believed to be one of his greatest enemies. You think he won't tell the others? I think he will, when he deems it the right moment to do so. And you trust him to choose well? I don't know. You don't want to choose. Silence was everything the Warhawk needed as an answer. That, and I saw something in him. The Sundame finally relented. You believe him to be his second coming? The Hokage simply shook his head, giving an almost amused smile that didn't reach his eyes. For a moment I thought you were going senile. It was good while it lasted. Danza commented. That got a light chuckle from his leader. No, not yet. Hiruzen replied, still smiling. He is similar. But it's a bit too soon to tell. We'll see soon enough. As these words left the Shimura's mouth, the Sundame's eyes narrowed. Did you do something? Did you have something to do with what happened? Of course not. Although, if I did, do you think I would admit it? So, yes and no, ha. Now, it was the Warhawk's time to chuckle. What are you trying to do? For the longest time, the question went unanswered. Before the last words were said and the Hokage was left alone to ponder in his office. I'm trying to follow your example, Hiruzen. The next day's walk towards the academy was awkward. Not only because it was the first day both, Naruto and I, woke up in our new house but also because of all that had happened the day prior. There was also the fact that we had left the Akimichi's house after being notified of the attack at Naruto's apartment. The others were sure to have at least some questions about the matter. I, for my part, had another set of thoughts not entirely disconnected with the events of the last night. I looked at my blonde friend from the corner of my eye. He didn't know about the note, and if I had my way, he wouldn't ever do. The boy had enough in his plate without having to worry about anything else. More than he already was, that is. After stepping inside the classroom, we had a whispered conversation with Chaoji and the others as both of us explained what had happened. Obviously, I omitted the Kyuubi secret, for now at least. The Akimichi heir decided that he would stay right beside Naruto for the rest of the day, apparently, as he sat right next to him instantly. He was a loyal friend indeed, I thought with a smile as I sat in another table with Shikamaru and Shino on each side. What are we going to do? Shikamaru whispered, and I had no trouble suppressing a smile. That question brought enough bad thoughts to quench down my happiness. With a look I could tell both boys were angry. Not that it was evident, but anyone that knew them well enough could tell. Shikamaru wasn't sprawled lazily over the table. Instead, he was sitting almost straight while resting his head on his fist and facing me, the fingers of his other hand slowly drumming over the wood. The ever-silent Abraham was even less obvious. He looked the same as always, but the almost unnoticeable buzz of his bugs told me about his annoyance. Why do you think there's something to do? I asked, feigning confusion, and both frowned at me. You look angry. So, either they haven't found the culprit. Shikamaru started counting with his fingers. Or they did and did nothing about it, or you can seriously hold a grudge. Or one of the firsts together with the last. Shino added while pushing his glasses up. Shino's right. Their frowns deepened. What are we going to do? The Abraham was the one to ask this time, and I looked between them. I have a name. I whispered back, and their faces snapped towards me. How? Shino asked this time. I don't know how or who. But someone gave me a clue. I explained, and Shikamaru's eyes narrowed for a second. A ruse? He questioned. I'll have to check. We'll have to check. The Nara corrected me as Shino nodded in agreement. I don't know why everyone hates him. But it can't be a good enough reason. I know. Once more both of them all but snapped their necks at me. I can't tell you, not right now at least. I can't. Both of them regarded me for a few seconds before nodding their heads in understanding. It isn't a good reason, is it? Shikamaru continued prodding. Not even close. I answered with a shake of my head. Then, what do we do? Shino asked, and I turned my eyes to him. We are going to help. Why? Because you would do the same for any of us. This time it was me that regarded both of them. I trusted Shikamaru. He was my closest friend right next to Naruto. Him being smarter than average and me being older than I was supposed to made it pretty easy for us to understand each other, even if he was smarter than even me. He was the closest I could get to talking with someone my age without having to talk with an adult. And I was truly grateful for that. Shino, for his part, wasn't nearly as close with us. But I trusted him on this one. Mostly because I had come to understand why he approached us. He could relate a lot with Naruto's case. His clan was treated with disgust most of the time, and while not nearly as bad as the outright contempt directed at the blonde, it was still something that they shared. A kindred spirit of sorts. And as such, he would support the Jinchuriki. Not to mention that none of our group had ever reacted badly towards his specialization. He had even told us how grateful he was for it, in his own indirect way. His personality prevented him from having truly emotional conversations. That made it even more important to let him in on this one. He was being emotional now. Track, confirm, gather information, plan and punish. I told them and turned my attention back to the class with a neutral expression. As the day passed, all of us tried our best to stay right besides Naruto. Now and then his mood would drop and we would have to cheer him up. I decided after the second time that I would have a chat with him after classes. I needed to know what was going through his head and put a stop to it. The blonde should never look like that, and if I had any say in it, he wouldn't. What the hell happened to you, idiot? I clenched my fists together as Kiba asked his stupid-ass question to Naruto. The blonde had been much more subdued than normal, and even the dumb mutt could tell, apparently. Kiba. I called out coldly and he turned to me almost snarling. Shut up. I said curtly. I really wasn't in the mood to deal with him. What? Mad that I insulted your girlfriend here? He mocked while poking a clearly irritated Naruto. Will you shut up, dog breath? The blonde said, contrary to the shouting he would usually do. His downtrodden mood made it even more difficult for me to control myself. I got really angry every time I noticed how affected Naruto was by what happened. He finally realized his stupid dream won't come true, right? Kiba asked this time as if suddenly everything made sense for him. My knuckles were sure to be white with the amount of pressure I was putting on my fists. It was about time, dumbass. Enough. Iruka called out over ours and the others' conversations for the Taijutsu spars. Our group sat together as usual, but this time I didn't start a shogi match with Shikamaru. Ignore him. I said, even though my own voice gave away how angry I was too. You'll prove him wrong when you become Hokage. Believe it. Naruto replied with a resolute nod and I gave him a small smile. It's getting more annoying. Shikamaru pointed out with a disinterested tone as usual, although he was pointedly staring towards the Inuzuka. Why? Because he is getting lower and lower in the rankings. His pride is being hurt, so he tries to hurt others more. Shino analyzed, and once more I heard the buzzing of his bugs. I wish I could. Chouji started before being interrupted by Iruka. Kiba Inuzuka vs Ig Sata. At another time, I would have grinned at the match-up. I would have been pleased to finally being able to prove to the mutt that I wasn't here to be his joke and target. As it was, my expression didn't even twitch, remaining neutral the whole time. He is a clan heir. Shikamaru pointed out as I stepped towards the circle. I know. I reassured as we did the seal of confrontation and stepped back to take our stances. I'll finally be able to prove that your first place is just a fluke, weakling. He said, snarling at me. I imagine it'll be another nail on the coffin of the idiot's dream. That was it. He was going down. Start, Sensei said, and I instantly started calling out mentally. For a split second I noticed that Kiba had frozen in place and a screen had appeared in the corner of my sight. I ignored it. Running. Free running. Intermediate Taijutsu. A second later, just as Kiba was recovering from whatever had stopped him, I was in front of him burying a fist in his gut. Taking full advantage of free running's buffs, I jumped over him while using my arms to maneuver after grabbing his head midair. I swung his body on the air while I was still up before landing and threw him against the ground with a loud thud. I stared at him as he tried to get air inside his lungs. I'm tired of you insulting my friends, I said, and with a simple kick, I knocked him out. Winner, Ig Sata, Iruka called out, and while he looked a bit surprised, he didn't look angry. That was a relief, not that I would apologize. The mutt had it coming for some time now. I told you he was an heir, Shikamaru said, and I shrugged. What? He'll recover just fine. He snorted at that. Not even Chaoji looked put off by what had happened. He even gave me a stiff nod when I looked his way. Now a little calmer, I looked at the screen that had appeared before the spa. Bloodlust, active, LVL1. Increases the user's projected desire to kill, maim or hurt onto the target or targets. The effect increases with level. Consumption 10 energy points per second. I thought I would get this skill much later, I thought to myself. Although, considering everything that had happened the last day, it made some sense. I was sure the effect without the skill was minimum, and with the skill it wouldn't be that much. And it certainly hadn't been the reason for Kiba's freeze. He must have been surprised by it, thought, and that should be the real reason. Oh. After classes, Naruto and I guided our friends towards our new house. As a celebration of sorts, although all of us knew it was to keep the Uzumaki's mood up, all except him, that is. Soon enough, Chaoji and Naruto were already sparring in the improvised Taijutsu circle we drew in the garden, and Shino, Shikamaru and I were looking from the side. So, first, we have to find him. The Nara took over once I had informed them of the name I was given. Then we have to follow him so that we can gather information and confirm he is guilty. I'll be the one to do that. Shino took over from there. Why? Because I'm the best at stealth. I had to grudgingly nod at that. The guy was twice as good as I was with stealth active. I was sure that if I was an Abiram I would get some kind of perk to buff stealth skills or something. There had to be a trick, I grumbled internally. Once we get that done, we'll be able to plan a punishment. Shikamaru finished. We'll have to be careful. He is an Inuzuka, and as such it'll be even more difficult to get away with anything. They can track you down easily with their enhanced senses, not to mention their ninken. My clan has a species of insects that can mask scents. Shino informed us, and Shikamaru and I turned towards him with wide eyes. That will be perfect. Still, I have to be the one to do it in the end. They both turned to me with frowns, and I quickly explained myself. They'll suspect us. Especially Shino if they can't find a scent. We'll have to make sure you all have an alibi. If we can do it without leaving evidence, then they won't have anything to get me. And no one knows where I am most of the time besides Naruto. You on the other hand have families keeping their eyes on you. Their frowns stayed in place for a few moments before both grudgingly nodded. I was glad I had decided to tell them. Kami knows what crazy thing I would have done to get away with a punishment for the Inuzuka. There was no way I would have found an effective way to conceal my scent from their senses and dogs after all. It had been a risk. But I trusted my friends. I had to, otherwise, I would be back to how I felt at the start. Alone. For now, this is all speculation. Shikamaru concluded. We'll plan more once we get the information. You'll plan either way, won't you? I asked, sending a smirk his way, to which got a sigh out of him before he returned the gesture. Let's go, Chaoji. It's getting late, he said, ignoring my question and getting the other two to stop their spar. See you tomorrow, guys, Naruto said while waving as the others walked back to their homes. He looked a lot more cheerful than he had been during the day, thought with a smile. Let's go. I'll make ramen, I said, and I swear that his eyes sparkled. Woohoo! He exclaimed as he practically sunshined inside. Set the table, damn it, I shouted at his back. I'm not doing everything again. Okay, he grumbled from the seat he had already taken at the table. I shook my head at him. How had I ended up babysitting a Jinchuriki? I asked myself, not for the first time. Aren't you going to tell me, Naruto? I kept myself from turning to look at him as I prepared the meal. About what? The nervousness in his voice told me that he knew exactly what I was talking about. I stopped myself from sighing and kept going. What's in your mind? I asked softly, and for a long moment the only thing that could be heard inside the house was Naruto setting the table and me preparing ramen. Until I heard what should be the last thing my blonde friend had to get. From then on, only the sounds that I made were heard for what felt like an hour. I'm too much trouble, aren't I? He muttered, so low that I almost missed it. My hand clenched and I was sure bloodlust would have leveled up if I didn't have to contain myself around Naruto. What are you talking about? I questioned in annoyance. I knew. I already knew. Everybody hates me, he started. And I felt the need to track down everyone that glared at us in the streets and do a little more than just pranking. You've seen them, I know you have. You are too good to have missed it. The sliver of pride in his tone as he spoke on me made my heart both swell and ache. Everyone glares at me, as if I was the cause of everything that goes wrong here. The shops don't want to sell to me. More than once someone has cursed my existence. He went silent for a moment. Nobody had done something like this before though. Once more, his voice went so low that I had to strain my ears to hear it. I'm too much trouble, aren't I? He repeated. You have to endure their hatred just by walking beside me on the street. You have to buy and cook for me because I can't and nobody else will. Well, I can't very well let you burn another poor kitchen, can I? I said mirthlessly. It was true though, the one time he had tried to cook something had been abysmal. He chuckled hollowly. True. He sounded so tired. I hated this. I hated seeing and hearing Naruto like this. I was used to his cheerful self. Not this. This was just wrong. And now you have to worry and fear about someone thrashing your home. He continued, his voice breaking more and more as he went on. I shouldn't have asked for you to come with me. Now you'll. Shut up, Naruto. I was done listening to this. This wasn't like Naruto at all. My friend stayed silent after that. You are my friend, Naruto. And no matter what anyone does, that's not going to change. You are the only one that can push me away, Naruto. Do you want me to leave you? I asked. Silence. I thought so, I said, although a small part of me was relieved by his answer. Both of us kept quiet as we started eating, and it was after Naruto's fifth bowl that someone broke the silence. To my utter shock, he stopped eating, at which was half his meal, and turned towards me. Maybe I should, he said, looking more nervous than I had ever seen him. His arm shook almost violently as he scratched the back of his head, and his eyes kept darting around. Before I could ask what he meant, he clarified. Maybe I should ask you to leave. My hands froze midair and my neck almost snapped to look directly at him. His hand went from behind his head and rested on the table. On the other side laid his other hand, and, slowly, both started forming fists, adding more and more strength until his knuckles turned white. But I don't want to. I want you to stay. His gaze firmly set down on his hands as he spoke. Then, I'll stay, I said simply, and before I could even think about it. I didn't need to consider my answer after all. A big smile crept on my face as I considered his words. For all his emotional self, Naruto had never said something like that to me, or anyone for that matter, except maybe the Hokage. I wouldn't know about that. I didn't usually participate in their conversations after all. But to me, it was the first time he openly accepted that he appreciated my friendship. Usually, the most he would say was something along the lines of a boastful "you're the best," or the like. I'll stay for as long as you want me to, Naruto. And I truly would, through whatever the plot wanted to throw at him, even if I had or would change it for the worse somehow. Naruto was my friend, my best friend. It was as simple as that. He was the first person I had truly met since coming to this world. He was the one that showed me that surviving wasn't the best I could do. He hummed, before looking up at me with a watery grin and tears in his eyes. You're the best, I felt my grin widen even more and a rush of warmth flow through my body. Yes, I could do so much better than surviving. Now, how about we play some games? I found some in a cupboard last night. As I spoke, I saw his face lit up before he nodded enthusiastically. Brother, huh? I shook my head in amusement, still feeling like nothing could wipe the smile off. Obviously, I was wrong. Soon, Naruto had gone to bed and I sat once more at the dining room. Because, as great as my one-on-one moment with the blonde had been, I wouldn't be able to be truly happy with the bastard that had started all this still living happily. No, if anything, I had more reasons to get payback. Slowly, I stood up. I had to prepare. Oh. Shikamaru POV. I had to prepare. It was late that night, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Normally, I wouldn't have much trouble getting rest. But today was different. It was still fresh in my mind. There was an attack to your apartment. I could still remember Naruto's face as the Anbu said that at Choji's house. I had never seen him with anything other than that stupid grin of his or an occasional annoyed expression. And that was before I had to witness his downtrodden mood through the day. I hoped IG would set things straight before tomorrow. Also help me, the Inuzuka, or whoever it was, would suffer a lot. Most would be surprised at those thoughts coming from me. Anura being active at anything was a shock for almost anyone. But any member of my clan would be able to confirm. Anura's mind in their lazy mindset was more active than most people in a normal one. However, there was a small detail that had to be added. I wasn't in a lazy mindset. No, someone had targeted my friend. Granted, Naruto wasn't exactly the closest person to me in our group. But everyone in our circle was important. I was betting that in most members' minds, we were almost brothers. We had all bonded together as the outcasts we were. I was always seen as the lazy guy or the scary smart guy, depending on who you asked. Chaoji would always be that kinda shy guy or the fat guy, much to his ire. Shino would always be that creepy bug lover guy. Naruto was difficult. He was obnoxious, but the hate he received didn't make sense. I hoped IG would be able to clear that for us soon. It was giving me headaches sometimes. And then there was IG. For the longest time, I thought he was the odd one in our group, funnily enough. Because he was too normal. He was too good even. He never criticized. He never judged. He defended all of us. It was too good to be true. But, after months of being with him, I resigned myself to have to wait a long time to know what was up with him. For a while, I was content with finding out about other aspects of his person. Like the fact that he was much more mature than the rest of us. Or that he was smarter than most people. We had bonded over those things. It was a breath of fresh air to be able to chat with someone that wasn't intimidated by my intelligence or annoyed by my attitude. Especially if it wasn't an adult. I would go as far as to say that Chaoji was my brother in all but blood. However, I connected much better with IG. And this wasn't even considering the fact that the satyr seemed to love playing shogi with me as much as I loved playing with him. Fact that never stopped baffling me. The only person so far that had never been bothered by my skill at the game was my father. And he was, coincidentally, the only person I knew that could beat me. But it still bugged me. The fact that I knew there was more to IG. There was something there. Something that made him an outcast too. At one point, I had gotten a glimpse of it though. But we still will eventually go out there, probably with a team, in missions that will be dangerous. I don't want it to be my fault when a team member dies. I don't want it to be my fault if someone I know is killed or worse. That day I had witnessed something. And for the life of me, I never could put my finger on what. But the final piece had come soon after that. Can I go too? That's when I saw IG for what he truly was and I found myself oddly at peace. Even as I heard that commanding tone that I had only heard on my father. Even as I looked that cold expression take over his usually warm face. Even as I saw my friend's eyes turn absolutely murderous. I felt relieved. Because now I could say that I knew what made IG Satyr different. Now I knew just why he fit so well in our group. Because, yes, he had several attributes that made him stand out. But I had never seen a flaw in him. Not until that day. A fact that was quickly confirmed that day during the split second before his spar with Kiba. IG was scary. Maybe calling it a flaw was exaggerating. It wasn't like my friend was overly aggressive or anything of the sort. The fact that it had taken us months to know about this not so little detail of his nature proved that. But it was still there. And I could safely say that IG was a wolf in sheep's clothing. For good or bad. And the wolf's pack had been attacked. I smirked to myself. I could finally make sense of my friend. When we first met, I thought that his dream of being Shinobi no Kami was too simplistic for someone like him. A fact that was proved more and more as I interacted with him. But now I knew. He wanted to be Shinobi no Kami for the power it would give him. I don't want it to be my fault if someone I know is killed or worse. And he wanted the power to protect those he cared about. Everything made sense now, not. No, there was still more to IG. I knew. But I knew what I had to know about my friend now. He still would have his secrets, and maybe I would never know the whole of it. However, as it was, I was satisfied with the fact that my friend was someone that knew darkness. That had that in his heart, but instead of being bad, he used it for those he cared about. That was everything I needed to know about IG. I shook my head. I had gotten really sidetracked. But I couldn't help it, all these answers I had been seeking for so long were still fresh in my mind. However, I needed to think now. A friend had been attacked, I thought as I brought my hands together in what my friends called my thinking posture. I needed to prepare. That's it, guy, for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.